I'm Brock Holt.
Glenn Otto. This is DJ Peters.
This is Chris Woodward. This is Taylor Hearn with the Texas Rangers, and you listen to the Texas Rangers Fanatic podcast with Alex Plink.
With Alex Plink. Alex Plink. It's an Alex Plink.
With Alex Plink.
On Rangers Nation, it's Alex Plink with Dallas Sports Fanatic, and this is Texas Rangers Fanatic podcast episode 31. Welcome to the off season, or at least welcome to the first, or we're in month number 2 of the off season, as the Rangers season ended on the first weekend of October. And I am joined with my Rangers correspondent, Mr. Dylan Duell. Dylan, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, Alex. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk to you.
So, it was the season happened. I think that's the best way to put it on there. I mean, there were some good things. I got to see the work of Adolis Garcia and whether or not he should have been considered for Rookie of the Year. That's another story. But there were some good things that came out of 2021. And I know Ranger fans, some of them will scream and yell, be like, what are you talking about? But in your eyes, do you feel like there was some good that came out of 2021?
Yeah, I would definitely consider myself the optimist kind of fan, you know? And I didn't go to a ton of games as a media member like you did this year. I went to a lot of games as a fan with my son, you know, so I was openly rooting for the team a lot when I watched them. And from home, I would watch a lot because I was excited about the opportunity to see all these younger players. And I was ready for, you know, I knew the wins and loss record wouldn't be there, but I was excited for the potential growing of a lot of young players. And while there was some of that, you know, overall, you're still kind of exiting 2021 or 2020 with a ton of question marks about everyday players that are currently on this team's roster. Like, how many for sure are there, you know? I really wish we had a lot more concrete answers about that than we did. A lot of players had flashes and nice stretches, but hardly any of them, including Adolis Garcia, had a really good season start to finish. So that's a little bit concerning for me as a fan.
I think I can think of maybe 3 prominent, and of course, you know, going into spring training, who knows what's going to happen, but I can think of 3 positions where somebody has stapled in. And I do think Adolis, while he ended slowly, I think his overall season gets him a favored spot in the starting lineup next year, unless something kooky happens. I think with the way Dane Dunning pitched, I think he gets a spot. And then I do think with the way Taylor Hearn pitched, he gets a spot as well. Joe Barlow also, as far as closer goes, I think he's the front runner as far as closers go. And I'm sure there's maybe a couple along the lines, but those are the 4 where I can right now get a piece of paper with a pen and say those guys will have starting jobs, barring any injuries, to start opening day against the Yankees in 2022.
Yeah, I'd be excited to see a full 2022 season from. So I've been mixing up 2020 and 2021 the whole time.
We feel like we're in 2020-2. This is what this year has been.
Okay, so this season was 2021.
Yes.
Next season is 2022. I'm excited to see Dane Dunning without any limitations on what he can throw, you know? I'm
excited. You're excited. Dane's excited, I would assume. Newly married Dane Dunning, too.
I saw that on his Instagram story this weekend. Congrats.
Going to Hawaii for his honeymoon.
Nice. Maybe Kind of Fluffa can give him some good tips on where to go. Dane, I was encouraged by his performance, and then sometimes he would just get completely blown up in the start, you know, and that's what would inflate his numbers a little bit. And then he wouldn't get to pitch as many innings to kind of get everything back in order like some of the more prominent starters around the league would be able to. I agree on Garcia. I'm not going to bank on him hitting 30 homers or anything like that again next year based on how he basically did the entire second half of the season. But he's definitely stapled into one of the outfield spots going into next year, even pretty much no matter what they do this offseason to address that area of the roster. And then, I feel good about Barlow being one of the bullpen options. I would think we're not going to have Hernandez and Leclerc won't be ready for the opener
until June. I think may run into somewhat of a closer dilemma again. Who knows what's going to happen with Joe Barlow? You may run into a closer dilemma when Hernandez and Leclerc are ready to go, but you still have a couple months until that comes about. And I mean, if Josh Sborz, dominates and Barlow struggles in that 2-month span, I think you may give Sborz a spot. But I think right now, going into the season, 7th or 8th inning for Sborz.
Yeah, and then on the front of people, I wouldn't be surprised if they upgrade at position would be Nate Lowe.
Mm-hmm.
I was really rooting for Nate Lowe a lot to just absolutely staple himself into a future spot. I think the team definitely expected that from him. It was good to see the way he finished the season, maybe like the last 6 or 7 weeks. The power kind of ticked up, but man, you can't have your starting first baseman playing every single day and going like 6 weeks without a homer, like he did through July and part of August. And, he's very solid. He kind of reminds me of Mitch Moreland again, where like it's not the weakest spot on your team, but you can absolutely do better,
I'm a little torn on that because he did get on base. He did produce a lot of walks. He was clearly the team's walk leader when Gallo left.
Yeah.
And then he would single you to death at times. So, yeah, you don't really expect that. You expect a little bit more from your 4 or 5 hole hitter. If you move him up to 2, which I know is not what you're wanting to do, but if you do move him to 2 or down to 6 or 7, the amount of production by that standards is very well.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great if he could be in that complimentary role.
But then you need somebody to back you up in a 4 or 5 spot.
Maybe this is just optimist me thinking, but I do think they're going to get that out from someone outside of the organization right now. To where I think they'll get a solid right-handed number 3 hitter in this lineup.
Okay.
And people might kind of question why they might do that based off where they are in their rebuild, but everything that everybody's saying indicates that they are going to get one of those bats. There's a lot of them available, and they're going to get one. Just because they need to inject something into this lineup.
And I mean, maybe not even 1, but 2, 3, depending on if you're talking to tiers, like a tier 1, talking about the major shortstops on the market. I would say, 1 of those, and then maybe a tier 2, and then a tier 3 type free agent. They may go 1 of each. I think going into what I had predicted last month, I had Corey Seager, Chris Taylor, and then a dark horse pick. And considering how much Jorge Soler meant to the Braves, I don't know if the Braves would bring him back, but that was an option that I got a power right-handed bat to kind of complement as far as the lineup goes. I don't know how they'll go, the Rangers, but I think 3 bats like that is really going to propel in this lineup. And I think at some point you have to look at, what you have in your farm system. I'm curious as far as catcher position too, because offensively, the numbers for Jonah Heim and Jose Trevino weren't too great. But with a catcher position, you also have the pitch framing, which those were 2 of the best. So it's hard to really evaluate those 2 in a sense of did they have a good year? Did they not have a good year? On paper, it doesn't look good when you're looking at basic statistics, but when you look at the catcher statistics, as far as framing goes, they were 2 of the best.
Yeah, I think obviously you could improve at catcher very easily. But I'm at peace that that's just not a top priority based off like what you said, what those two give you on the defensive end. And then just
I think you could survive giving him
Yeah, we could
another
survive.
chance
yeah,
to maybe have a good offseason, a successful spring training. I think you can survive the catcher position.
And then I think a lot of contending teams kind of survive without dominant offensive numbers from their starting catchers, So I'm willing to give Jose another chance and Heim, try to find some more consistency. Because again, he was another player who had some great stretches, but then some pretty big valleys in between those peaks.
Switch hitting catchers are, I would assume, very hard to come by. So you are just begging for Heim to break through, because to have a switch hitting catcher on your roster with the framing ability that he has, you do whatever it takes. It's similar to Ronald Guzman's defensive ability at first. You're just begging, giving him every chance you can to be successful at the plate, because you know that you have, I would assume, a maybe potential Gold Glover at first base if he could back it up with the offensive numbers. Unfortunately, he hasn't been able to.
Yeah, that was a bummer, and seeing him go down so early in the season was definitely unfortunate. And it's just like what was his first or second game trying to play the outfield? That was
it was first regular season game.
Pretty much his first opportunity out there in that first game as well. That little lazy pop up. I'd say he's playing left field, right?
Yeah, but I mean, to this day, I don't know why you would have his first game in left field at the Trop.
Right.
On that artificial surface, but that's just me.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be on a spring training invite kind of contract with the team. I think the rest of the league kind of has enough of a book on him, to kind of know what he is. So we saw he didn't get claimed on waivers, right? So
they assigned him to AAA, and now it's just wondering if he accepts that assignment or doesn't. I believe if he doesn't accept it, he becomes a free agent. But I don't think that step has hit yet.
Right. Yeah, he's a player who can play in the major leagues, but he's yet to show that he's lived up to the kind of potential that you thought he could have. And at this point, it's been a while of waiting on it to happen. So can't keep waiting for forever.
And I know that talking with the organization in September when he was rehabbing and getting back to bulk, there was some uncertainty because, what is his future like? They kind of stepped around there. It's like, look, let's wait till he's healthy and then we'll evaluate. So it just sort of seemed like we don't quite know. We're not ready to make a definitive answer, which is fair. If he goes into spring training with the ball club, does he have sort of the same opportunity he did last spring? Maybe not necessarily. May have to work a little bit more, but I wouldn't say to totally, if he does go with the team in the spring training, to totally rule him out 100%. Now, I think we were talking about like 50-50 last year. I would say Lowe probably 90, Guzman 10, but I wouldn't say totally rule him out.
Yeah, we'll see. He's going to have even less, I don't know how to put it, but like cred or inside track familiarity with the organization. Like, I think it's pretty clear based off what Woodward says throughout the year and things like that. Like, they just need to see results from people, right. And they're not just going to keep waiting on people because they like them or anything like that. We need to start seeing results. So if he's not doing anything, we don't have time for it.
Team. Yep. And it's almost like a prayer answered at some points, where you're finally seeing players' performance accountability finally hit the organization.
Yeah, it's refreshing to hear that, but then it is kind of scary when you don't really have any immediate minor league talent ready to push them. I mean, there is definitely talent coming up, but there was just nobody here to really push anybody who wasn't performing out this season. Just kind of had to fight through it.
And that's the thing where I think a lot of people don't really make that connection on, where you see guys that are struggling in the major leagues and you're like, oh, bring up, a Josh Young. And it's not so much they don't want to bring him up. I think it's a matter of, is he ready to play in the big leagues? Because you already know, especially in 2021, the team's not going anywhere. So if you don't feel that he's ready to play in the big leagues, why are you going to put him up prematurely? There's no point to. And even if this year, going into 2022, there's some confliction going. Is this going to be a team that is going to make a threat into the postseason, or maybe, be in August, still be in the race? I don't know. A lot of indications could be we're in the same boat as 2021, maybe a little bit better and more of an identity of where this team is headed, but not quite there yet. So if a lot of these minor league guys aren't ready, why put them up in a situation where they're set up to fail?
Yeah, for sure. There are some situations where just out of absolute necessity, people got brought up. I think that was kind of the case with the Alexis or the Glenn Ottos, later in the year. But these position players, I mean, just to make a spot start, or thinking like Jake Latz or whatever, like he did in Cleveland.
That was yeah. I mean, you kind of had to do that because you had to make some roster configuration, and you needed an infielder.
Yeah, who was the infielder they brought up for like 2 games? Ryan something.
It was. I may completely botch it. I apologize. Ryan Burrows, I believe.
Yeah, I was gonna say Ryan Drees, but that was.
That's a long time ago, my friends.
Yeah.
That's old school.
Yeah, but you don't see them. You don't do that with position players. There's really no reason to bring up a position guy for 3 days and then just send him back down.
Oh, of course. Ryan Duro is the name.
Duro.
Sorry, not Burrow. Duro.
The D right on the last name.
Oh, I just had another thought. Sorry. Yeah, it was Ryan Duro. From what I gathered, he was a pretty good infielder as far as defensively goes too. So, but I mean, it's kind of cool to make your major league debut in 2021, get to in Cleveland in front of fans. So still a good moment. But no, I agree.
It was in Cleveland. I remember.
Yeah, it was in Cleveland.
The DJ Peters big home run, put him up 7-3. DJ Peters is another guy that I was rooting a ton for him to just seize the opportunity, and again, he had stretches that were absolutely great, but then just the overall body of work is not enough to feel absolutely great at all about 2022 and his position on the roster.
And I think DJ Peters, compared to some other guys, has a little bit more going for him. I think he's one of those where, unless he completely just lays an egg in spring training, I think he'll get a starting role on opening day in 2022. But he's not on the Adolis Garcia guarantee yet. I think he's kind of halfway through the door, but he hasn't made it to the door completely. I think other guys are definitely on there. And I would say Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is also one that's probably completely in the door too. Now, whether that's going to be at short, whether that's at third, I don't know. I've kind of made an indication that, or second base, even if you want to count for Izzy at second base. But one thing people noticed on roster projections is I didn't have Young on there. And I think ultimately what I think is they're going to have him start in the minors and maybe around Memorial Day, bring him up, give it about a month in the minors, see how that goes. And then I think somewhat early in the season, he'll get a shot.
I'm hopeful that he starts in the majors on opening day. But I mean, I understand as well because I mean everybody had a delayed minor league season start this year, so get him that few more extra weeks of at bats, not only in spring training but then facing minor league pitching, which he did very well against at multiple levels in 2021. So might as well just give him a little bit more, especially if you have someone as competent as Isaiah Kiner-Falefa ready to man third base, or maybe Nick Solak, whoever you feel comfortable with defensively at that position in the meantime.
And I think the bottom line is because he is your building block in this franchise, that you want to make sure he's ready. And so if there's even if he's 99% ready, no, you're not 100%. Let's play it, because again, do we really think, I hate to be, the one that said, but do we really think this is going to be a playoff team heading into 2022? Probably not. 2023, I would say pretty good. It's hard to tell, obviously, with we haven't even gone through off season of 2021 into 2022, but I'd be curious to see even what this opening day roster is going to look like. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be just a complete guess right now, really. There's so many, like I said right at the start, I wish there were less questions, but I mean, that does make this offseason more intriguing, especially considering what Chris Young, John Daniels are saying that they might be interested in doing.
So who's your free agent guys that you're aiming for? From a realistic standpoint,
I don't really think any one of the shortstops is realistic, because I think that's priority number one. I'm hopeful.
Do you think they'll acquire one of those guys?
They'll get one of the shortstops. I don't think that they'll go to 9-10 years with Seager or Correa like someone else might be willing to. Some of the projections I've been reading are just kind of all over the map when it comes to that next tier, the story, the option. I'm a little less excited about Trevor Story than maybe I would have been a year or a year and a half ago. But man, he did look really good hitting at Globe Life Field all the times he's done it so far. And it's just so clear that this team just needs a really good, strong, power right-handed bat in the middle of its lineup. And I mean, if he's the most affordable of the options that allows you to still pursue other people outside of that, I'd be at peace with that. I'm a little more interested in them acquiring multiple really solid starting pitchers as opposed to a really heavy incentives-laden contract with Clayton Kershaw or something like that. Like a lot of people are talking about, we just need innings is what we saw this year with the inexperience that surrounds the rest of the pitching staff. And maybe some of these younger pitching options will surprise us, but what if the role that was filled by Jordan Lyles this year could be filled by somebody who is actually just a little bit better, if you know what I mean? That's someone who's actually a quality right now, almost all-star level starting pitcher, but not quite Cy Young, $30-35 million a year starter, that next tier down.
I do think that, and there's two veterans that were on this club that are free agents that I would not be opposed if they brought back. And I know there's some groaning on there. Jordan Lyles is one, because not so much. And again, this falls into the same category of, you don't see this on a stat sheet, but the leadership and the impact that he made. So, for example, you have, he led
the team. He led the team in hats, right?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
You can't put a dollar amount on that.
He had more Cowboy hats than anybody else on that roster. So,
and that shows. It's silly, but there's a level of respect there to get that nod over and over again.
It's just like Brock Holt and Charlie Culberson. When you look at it, their numbers don't look great. But if you can't quantify an impact that they have in a clubhouse.
Right.
And, if having Jordan Lyles means that your younger guys are going to vastly perform better, even though Lyles isn't performing good, wouldn't that be a good trade-off in the 2022 season?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah. And then if he's just okay to keep fighting through, even if it means his ERA is going to be over 5, we need you to go 6 or 7 tonight, buddy. Be the good soldier, and that's a good guy to have, and he's done that well for the last couple of years.
Or from a mentoring standpoint of guys like Young, if someone like Charlie Culberson's on the roster and makes him a better player, even though you have someone like Culberson on the roster, wouldn't you take that trade-off?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think with his connection to Chris Woodward, I think Culberson will be back to fill, at least for as long as they can warrant his presence being around. If Young comes up and just absolutely dominates right from the start, and then maybe the other utility infielders who kind of get switched in a lot, maybe like a Solak or
and you always hope with those guys that they turn out to be like an Ian Kennedy, where they have a decent season to where they are trade pieces that you can trade away to other teams. So you sign up for a 1-year deal, and they have the impact that they have, and then halfway through the year you trade them to another ball club and you get something back in return.
Right. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, but Charlie seemed to be a great presence, and that is important as this next phase of the team's process continues. You need to have that sort of good culture, and you can't just have all guys in their early to mid-20s and taking up the entire clubhouse.
So I hate to put you on the spot, but you said as far as starting pitchers go, not so much one big pool, but maybe a couple of medium-sized pools. Which guys do you think? I don't even know if you have the free agent list on there. But
I've seen names and stuff, but I'm not remembering them as much as I do. Like, obviously, I remember at the very top, there's Max Scherzer, Clayton Kershaw, the huge question marks like Noah Syndergaard. But I don't really think the Rangers should target guys like that. I mean, of course, I'd be perfectly fine with the sexiness, the nice story of Clayton Kershaw coming.
Yeah, of course.
I'd like to know that he was healthy for sure before signing it off. Just as like a fan, it's like it's like I wish people had more reason to care about the team,
It is hard, I can understand. It is difficult because patience, it's very frustrating to have patience on a team that's losing. And I'm sure, as it's weird because DFW is a big market, but the Rangers are act like a smaller market team. They're not like a LA, Chicago, New York type market. So it takes a lot longer to build a team up to have sort of a semi-dynasty, which is what everybody aims for, and which is what this ownership, what Chris Young, John Daniels, and what they're looking to do. They're looking to build a Houston Astros-like dynasty without some of the other strings attached to it, if you know what I mean. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what they're aiming for. And with the type of spending that they had to get rid of, and the players they have in there, it's going to take time. I think that's ultimately what everybody's trying to say is that, look, this isn't going to happen overnight. This isn't going to happen in 1 year. This is going to take time to develop. Yeah,
and I don't know. It's a market that's so, I don't know. I think the Rangers could average 20,000 fans at their new stadium without really even trying next season.
How'd your son like the stadium?
He loves it, but I want people who are there to care, It's cool, like similar to the Mavericks, that you can sell out every game, or to the Cowboys, like they can sell out every game without an effort. We're just that kind of market, you know?
Yeah.
Where people go to games. We don't have attendance problems really with I would say, 4 major teams here in the area. But like people caring is a whole other story, you know? These teams got to give people a reason to care, with the exception of the Cowboys. And it's hard to accept that on the baseball front, I guess, because, you know, admittedly, I think it's kind of without question that it doesn't grasp the average person like it once used to. But at the same time, this market has shown that it will absolutely love and support the Rangers when they give them a really good reason to. They don't need to give me a reason, but I'm not the average person.
Right.
So I'm excited. That's why I watched a ton of games in 2021, a ton of losses. I attended a ton of 2021 losses. So I understand the process of waiting and everything like that. The average fan isn't that forgiving or willing to stick around and wait. But I don't know. We'll see what they do. I looked up some names. I think Marcus Stroman is an option. And then another flyer after that, you know, because I do feel good, like you said, about Taylor Hearn. And
I will say bullpen is not something that they should really assume. I feel like they have really good bullpen depth.
Yeah, and then those kind of things, like it's such a year-to-year thing, like it just kind of all falls into place, you know.
And I think Hearn is, I mean, I know that the years of service may not quite add to it, but I feel like the leadership that he has kind of fills that veteran role.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think Hearn, whatever role they use him in, I think he'll do well. I was really encouraged by his second half of the season. If there was one guy on the team that kind of really reversed in a positive way what you thought about him at the beginning of the season to what he ended up, to what you felt about him at the end of the season, better than anybody, it was him for sure.
And I feel like, you know, going up and down the roster, you know, there's potential there. It just hasn't really shown, or it's like you said, shown in spurts. Nick Solak showed in spurts. Willie Calhoun in spurts. I really want to see Eli White kind of flourish, because the speed that he has can be a form of weapon. But again, one aspect of his game that's really good, but just hasn't been able to get on base, which when you have that speed, getting on base is a necessity. But I feel like the speed that he has could be really good in the outfield too, defensively.
Yeah. It was unfortunate for him that he missed so much of the season with an injury, because again, it's a guy who's they've been waiting on, you know, waiting to show us something, you know. And again, he has those very brief moments, but overall the body of work is not that impressive. But you're right, with the speed, it is an absolute weapon. And you see that guys like that make an impact on major league rosters all the time. Just based off what I've seen at the major league level, I'm very skeptical that he's a everyday outfielder.
Leody Taveras fall into that category as well.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, I feel like the flashes with Leody. I don't know. We try to talk ourselves into his end of the season being strong, but if you just look at the numbers, it's still hideous. But he had such a terrible start that it was going to be nearly impossible to dig his way out of that once he got brought back up. But again, there's so many outfielders in this organization right now, with so few certainties among them, you know. So I do think that will be at least one starting for sure established outfielder, someone that they'll bring in, whether it's via trade or free agency this winter.
You know who's an intriguing infielder to really think about? Andy Ibanez.
Yeah, I mean, again, I wish he didn't get hurt either for that little stretch that he did, because if you take his body of work overall, it was very solid, and he was kind of like an afterthought for me for a while, but then he just kept playing and he kept producing. I think of the big moment he had, like a game-tying homer in a game before Jonah Heim hit a walk-off. It's funny, Isaac can remember that. My son, for those listening, he can remember that exact moment for some reason. It was like a Sunday. We got home from Sam's. He saw the Andy Ibanez home run, and he saw the Jonah Heim walk-off home run. And he remembers it, I think, because the night before we were in the car listening on the radio, and Jonah Heim hit the walk-off home run before that. So it's just those little things that stick with you. That's my Andy Ibanez note. But he was definitely very solid for a good chunk of the latter part of the season. So, I mean, we'll see. I'm really interested to see how they utilize him, Solak, and because there's only so many spots on the infield. And again, I really think they're going to get a starting shortstop that moves Solak or Kiner Falefa over to second base or possibly third base. We'll see. Where do you think he would move if they get a shortstop?
Well, that depends, and that's going to depend on whether or not they feel Josh Young is ready. Because if that's the case, if they get a shortstop from the market, then there's no point in bringing in a third baseman, because you are either going to have Young's your future third baseman. So You're either going to have him start third or Isaiah Kiner-Falefa start third. Because honestly, when you look at Andy Ibanez, Nick Solak, and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, to me, there's no doubt IKF is the best defender among the three. And I think it's hard to determine offensively if Andy Ibanez deserves a starting job more. I think that's what spring training is going to vie into. But I do feel like if you don't, as far as third base, if Young's not starting on opening day, that Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is going to be in that opening day roster. And again, whether or not you want Solak or Ibanez at second base, that's what spring training's gonna decide.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say Solak you would think would have the inside edge just based again on that familiarity and hope thing we've been talking about, but Ibanez just had a better overall season and is a similar amount of time, I would assume, based off Solak's stretch in AAA. But I mean, we'll see. It's going to be really hard for them to make those kind of calls. But I don't know.
There's going to be some tough cuts.
There's going to be some tough cuts. And it shouldn't be tough because this team just needs to be better, But that's the thing about baseball, you play it every single day. You watch these guys, you root for them to grow, and you kind of get attached to them. And I'm sure inside that clubhouse, it's the same way, even on a way bigger scale, knowing them personally. Like in football, it's like we don't have time for anything. Don't get attached to these people. We are trying to win on these 17 Sundays we're out there. And the NBA and the NHL, it's a little more forgiving, but in the middle ground. But in baseball, you just get attached to people. You see their personality in the dugout, and you root for these guys. But this team is just in a spot where it just needs to be better, So, I mean, if some guys I'm sure I've been reading a lot of articles about 40-man roster crunches we're going to be seeing coming up, and there will be some guys who are like, wait, I thought this guy was an important part of the future, but they just can't keep waiting on everybody.
No, I totally agree on there. And, they are – I know to some fans it's a pretty easy cut on there. But I like to think of it as like a relationship, You at some point you gotta, if it's not gonna work out, it's not gonna work out. And it's hard. It's difficult for an organization to cut certain guys, especially if they've been with the team for a while. But at some point, like you said, you gotta think about your future. And so ultimately that conversation, that little I don't know how people handle their breakups, but if they happen eventually, and you just gonna have to, it's just gonna have to happen.
Yeah, and for a team that won 60 games this year, there's going to have to be some tough conversations, and you just got to do it because improving this team has to be the number one priority for sure. This year was about giving growth opportunities and everything, and we saw guys who aren't necessarily deserving of everyday at-bats getting everyday at-bats for a long time. And now next year is about just improvement and results, so the leash is definitely going to be shorter, I think, and it may not be as fun, just based off a little bit higher expectations. Because again, I do think that there will be somebody making a lot of money or multiple guys making a lot of money in that room next year, and that just naturally boosts up the expectations for everybody, I believe.
Well, the hope is the Donnie Ecker and Tim Heyer signings are going to propel this offense, because I would say the offense was the bigger issue. I felt like there was some bad pitching spurts, but I felt like overall there was some well-pitched games.
Yeah.
And I felt like you were dealing with a lot younger of a pitching staff. I mean, I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but I felt like you were dealing with a lot younger of a pitching staff. So you were a little bit more susceptible to, growing pains.
Yeah, on offense, for sure. I feel better in general exiting 2021 about the pitching staff as well. Just as far as people who I'm confident will eventually grow into somebody you can count on in a full-time major league role than I did about the offense, and the position players, because there's just still, again, so many people got everyday opportunities and just so few, basically nobody on the offensive end. You're like, yes, for sure, that is a member of the starting lineup whenever this team is playing meaningful late September baseball again. I mean, I'd like to say it's Garcia, but again, I'm just not quite sure based off how that second half of the season went. But I mean, we'll see.
And when you're talking about, from a closer perspective, like Joe Barlow or Ian Kennedy early in the year, if your team's not winning and you go to the ninth inning, you're not going to have a closing opportunity. So I think in the end, I felt like the Rangers' back end of the bullpen was really good.
Yeah, I felt like it was good too. And it always seems like those kind of things kind of work themselves out. They've already made some interesting roster, or they've lost a couple guys.
Well, and then the other thing is that when you talk about relieving and bullpen, that's probably year to year the most inconsistent aspect. You're going to have a good bullpen one year and then have a horrid bullpen the next year with the same guys. So
yeah,
here's the other problem you run into, but that's unpredictable at times. So, there's no reason why some of these guys that performed well this year don't get an opportunity next year.
Right. Yeah, they'll get the opportunity. And like you said, the inconsistency thing in the bullpen, that's something that good teams deal with.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just so year to year, some guy can just lose it, or somebody can come out of nowhere, and every team deals with that. So, I mean, that kind of is what it is. I definitely do not expect them to spend any sort of considerable money on a bullpen option that's out there. But
especially when you have Hernandez and Leclerc coming back in month 3 of the season.
Right. Projected. Yeah, and if you can make another Ian Kennedy like flyer or something like that, why not? Just low dollar. Let's take a chance on this, and maybe it'll be something we can flip at the deadline if we're in that same spot again. Why not? But no need to even think about any of the bigger options out there.
Use your money for position players and starting pitchers.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and as far as viewers wondering about Ranger 7, you go to my YouTube channel, uploaded all the Ranger 7 interviews I did throughout the year. There were some really good ones. Unfortunately, some of those players are not on the roster, but most of them are. I'm trying to think of... Huh?
It's a cold business.
What was that? I'm sorry?
It's a cold business out here.
Oh, yeah.
Where's it going?
Yeah. Yep. The business side of Major League Baseball. It's I know. And sometimes it can be pretty nasty. Or you could be like Kyle Seager and get an email from your employer that says you're gone. You're not gonna be re-signed.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
How would you feel about that? Your employer sends you an email saying you're fired.
That was like during the season, right? It wasn't like right at the.
I think it was like towards the end.
Like there's still time to go, and for a guy who's been there for so long too, that's messed up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Think about your highly tenured employee, and that happened.
Yeah.
It sucks when people break up via text.
Yeah, it was a good year as far as the Mariners making some noise for the playoffs, but it was bad off the field year for the manager or for the Mariners in their front office.
Oh my goodness! It just and it's interesting because some of the people who were around the Mariners were people that talked to players within that organization when they came to Arlington, like right after the deadline. There was just a lot of. It was uncomfortable, to say the least, to be around that clubhouse. It was very uneasy, for good reason.
Yeah, you don't want that kind of noise going on.
No, especially a team that hasn't won. You want to be extremely aggressive, and even if you're being too aggressive at the deadline and you make the postseason and you're a one and done, and you may have to clean up some stuff the next year. For a team that hasn't been to the playoffs in, 18 years or something along those lines, that's still worth it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you got to give it to your fans once in a while,
Right,
yeah.
Right. Even if it's going to mess up, the next year, I still say you go for it.
Or the next 5 to 7 years, like the Rangers are dealing with right now, after what they did in 2015 and 2016, going for it like they did.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I mean, we'll always have those. I don't know. It didn't end pretty in 2015 and 2016, but just
we won't talk about 2015 and 2016.
I mean, just good winning baseball. Yeah. It is not easy to get to that point as we're experiencing right now. So if you can give your fans that, and heck, even I cherish those memories of on August 1st, looking up and down the projected Rangers lineup with Jonathan Lucroy and Carlos Beltran added into it. I love those moments as a fan. So, I mean, if you have a chance to do that for your fans and it makes sense, like it did for the Mariners this year, you got to go for it.
Exactly. Because, again, you never know when the next one is going to come.
You never know when the World Series champion will only win 88 games like it did this year.
And look at the moves the Braves made.
Right, yeah. But then at the same time, I've thought to myself, as I followed baseball this year and I saw teams like the Padres struggle the way they did, does it even make sense to go all in, because it's such a weird game, like we're talking about relievers, even position players, sometimes they just lose it from year to year,
Exactly.
But it's tough. It's so hard to build a winning baseball team. I don't ever just crapping on front office executives because it's just no set template way to do it, and it's so difficult as we've been experiencing for the last 4 or 5 winters here in Texas.
Exactly, and that's what people don't understand from the front office when they criticize the front office and one GM in particular.
Yeah.
You could sign somebody or you could trade for somebody, and on paper it looks fantastic. But at the end of the day, that player still has to go out and perform.
Yeah, and in baseball, you need 10, 12 other people on your team to
exactly
be really
and that's
good.
Why I think, and that's where I would say people may get mad at this, that baseball is the ultimate team sport.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
In football, you may be able to get away with a high praise quarterback with, not about a B offensive line, a C defense. You may be able to get away with that. I think back to the Green Bay Packers of 2011.
Yeah.
But, and then NBA and NHL may be a little bit tough because you still have to have two. If you could have two all-stars, a goalie, and a forward, you get away with that. And in the NBA, I feel like if you have one superstar, you may be able to sneak into the playoffs at least.
Yeah, and there's, as the Angels can tell you, it doesn't matter if you have the best player in the game of baseball.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. You need a team.
Exactly. Or you could be like the Dodgers and develop guys at a high pace.
Right. Yeah, there's no set way to do it, but Rangers are trying their hardest to get back to that level where they want to be. So we'll see what they do in the next few weeks. What are your thoughts on if there's going to be a lockout, and if so, how long is it going to be?
So I can tell you this. Well, I don't have any inside information on this, but I feel pretty confident that the deadline of 12/1, December 1st, that's not going to happen. So there will be a lockout. Whether I do think that spring training is going to be pushed a little bit.
Yep.
Maybe about a week or two. But I
Will that
don't.
be because the new CBA hasn't been agreed upon, or
Right.
just because it will be agreed upon and then they still need to delay things?
No, I think it just won't be agreed upon.
Do you think people are going to sign contracts without the CBA in place?
That's the thing.
Like these
Maybe a
massive
few.
ones? Probably
Right.
not.
Well, I don't know. You may get a few. Guys like Corey Seager, Marcus Semien were reported that they may sign before the CBA expires. But maybe some guys like Carlos Correa, Trevor Story, they may not. So I think once the result of 12/1 happens, and if it does turn out to be a lockout, I think there'll be a free agent lock for the next few months. And then we'll be back to free agent frenzy once everything is agreed upon. But I don't think opening day will be delayed by any stretch. I just think because then you lose from an ownership standpoint, you lose money, and pretty much everybody hated 2020. And so nobody wants to go back to that. So I think at that point, everybody's just going to say, you know what, let's just compromise.
I hope so.
Which should be what you do at the beginning, but people's greed overtakes their common sense.
Yeah, I would say that on both sides. You know, it's really hard to. I don't know. It's complicated, but it just seems like both sides are just so. I don't know. They're so at each other's throats.
And and hopefully for the first portion of spring training being delayed, I'm wrong. But we'll see what happens. And then, of course, we are hoping that opening day at Globe Life Field against the Yankees will happen.
Let's hope so. No delays.
No delays. We will see Joey Gallo at Globe Life Field on opening day.
In a Rangers uniform.
I highly doubt that. Actually, I really doubt that. Make that. But he'll be there on the 31st. I'd hope.
Yeah.
Some way, somehow.
Yeah. He gets critiqued on how he puts his uniform on in New York, but didn't exactly have to deal with stuff like that here in Texas.
I'm surprised they didn't criticize him for sneezing the wrong way.
Yeah. The New York media, it's tough.
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt. Dylan, man, appreciate it. For Rangers coverage, you can go to DallasSportsFanatic.com/Texas-Rangers. Follow me on Twitter at APlinkTX, Instagram APlinkTEX. Dylan, where can they find you?
On Twitter, I make it really easy for everybody. At Dylan Duell, my name, DYLANDUELL. And I think on Instagram, I'm just Dylan Duell, but 1 at the end, the number 1. This really hard, thought out, complex handles.
Do you think there's another Dylan Duell that you thought would have taken your name?
Yeah, luckily I don't have to do like the official Dylan Duell or anything like that to not confuse people or anything.
I think some people figure they put official because it makes them more important. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I haven't had that ego trip yet, so
Yeah,
hopefully-
I think
hopefully-
it will. I think we all will eventually. At
Yeah,
one point.
yeah. All right, man. I appreciate everything you do for the site, and I'm sure the readers do as well. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Dylan. And Ranger fans, who knows? Maybe in a few weeks there will be some big news. But for now, enjoy mid-November, enjoy Thanksgiving, and thank you all with Veterans Day 4 days ago. Thank you to all the men and women who served. And Ranger fans, hang in there.